Some of you may have already seen that an issue has come to the fore that is so complex and important in what it's about that once again I'd rather choose to do a video on this because, let's be honest, in written text would be a long message. I cannot promise this will be a short video. And the issue is the provision of pitches for Gypsy and Traveller communities. And there's no criticism in saying that outright as I have. It's a situation I want to explain. It is really detailed, a tad complex, but let me try my best, because I want people to understand. The District Council very often comes in for criticism, sometimes rightly so, sometimes otherwise. And this is something we, as a District Council, are having to do due to national requirements. And so I think, therefore, it's vital that I explain to people what is occurring. And in the first instance, and straight away, I want to be clear. Within Newark and Sherwood, but particularly in the Newark area, we have long-standing, multi-generational Gypsy and Traveller communities, not just living in pitches, many living in houses. These people have helped to develop and build and shape Newark as it is today. And so I know sometimes they get tarred with a brush. I think that's unfair. Every estate, every community will have some rotten eggs, and too often that taints the view of everybody. And that's surely the same here. We have regular liaison with Gypsy Traveller groups. I've met a good number myself, and I can vouch that it is wrong to taint an entire community. So thereafter, having already said we have a long-standing resident population, I need to address the issue that is coming forward. And that is simply put that we need to provide more pitches for that community, much in the same way as the government require us to build more houses, and that's done on different methods, but people are living longer, people are obviously having children, everybody wants a home, so the number of homes and properties in this country is increasing. The same is true of Gypsies and Travellers in our communities, living older, with children, who they wish to live together with as a community. And so you can imagine, if 5% of our community were Gypsies and Travellers, and we built 20 houses, theoretically, I should be looking to provide one pitch for that community. And that's some work that's been going on for some years to try and understand the numbers that are needed. And because we have that long-standing community, it is really impacting on our area in a way that is different to others. And I shall shortly come on to say that I think some of that's right, and some of it very plainly I think is wrong. So let's do the numbers then. Let's just compare ourselves to Nottinghamshire in the first instance. The numbers of additional pitches, which is probably a static caravan with a bit of land around it, the number of additional pitches required in different parts of Nottinghamshire. Broxtowe, 0. Gedling, 1. Mansfield and Ashfield, 3 each. Rushcliffe, 13. The City of Nottingham, 15, 1-5. Bassetlaw, 40, 40. In total, the rest of Nottinghamshire needs to provide 75 pitches over the next 5 to 10 years. Newark and Sherwood, 118. That's more than all of Nottinghamshire combined, and a good chunk more. Okay, you can understand that if you have some settled community, but that's a big number. And clear from that is that some areas are required to have no provision at all, and I question whether that's right. So obviously the question people will be asking, 118 pitches, where are they going to go? Now, in the first instance, and none of this has been secret, incidentally, over the past 2, maybe 3 years, we've been consulting and calling for pitches, as they say. So we've gone out and we've asked private landowners, has anybody got a site that they'd like to sell or potentially run themselves as a Gypsy Traveller site? And some came forward and they've gone through proper tests and assessments, and some have been discounted because they were in small villages but large numbers. You know, the primary school wouldn't cope with it, nor the GP surgery. There's no infrastructure. Same test as we do for different housing sites for people. And it's therefore been gradually narrowed down to 3. And again, those have been published recently a couple of times, so no secret, but I suspect it's not quite been spotted, if I'm honest with you. Where are the 3 sites? So the first is Chestnut Lodge in Barnby, which could accommodate 20 pitches. The second is Beaver Ironworks, which is to the south of Newark, and that could accommodate for 30 pitches. And the final is Trent Lane, which could accommodate for 19 pitches. Those that are quicker at maths than me, that's 69 pitches. That's not 118. So even identifying those does not meet the need for the next 10 to 15 years. But one hopes it would meet the need for at least the next 5 to 10 years. Am I saying that all of those sites will go forward? No. Am I being honest and clear that those are the sites that we need to assess and consider, and that at least 2 of those probably need to be purchased by the council? Yes. Do I again think there are issues with that? Yes, I do. And let me be clear what those are. So that 118 extra pitches has come out from a methodology that government sets. There are roughly 12 places in the country having to provide high numbers like we are here in Newark and Sherwood. 12 councils in effect. That's 12 out of about 309 councils across the country. So it's quite clear to me that it's somewhat inbuilt that we'll do it in fewer places rather than spreading communities across the country. And I just pose the question, is that quite correct? If it is a resident community expanding, spot on. If it is driving travellers and different communities into very few areas across the country, I'm not convinced it is. And I say that with no prejudice. When people say gypsies and travellers, it's between 8 or 9 different classifications of people with variant culture, background, religion, and to some extent ethnicity and nationality. And I don't feel it's proper to lump everybody together in that way or suggest that they all get on, as many of us don't in our communities. So there you go, a big number and a few places across the country. I believe the government needs to change that methodology. Or if not, recognise that they are quite overtly therefore saying very few places in the country will provide for this nation's provision for Gypsy and Traveller communities. That therefore is a national decision. So I am pushing very hard on your behalf. That being the case, show me the money. Because I'll come to some figures shortly, and I do not feel for one moment that it is proper that the taxpayers of Newark and Sherwood district pick up costs on what is effectively a national decision. The other thing we can do, and again I want to be clear on this, Tony Lane has been an area where a number of gypsy families have lived for several generations, but it is very much at risk of flooding, and a graphic will show demonstrating that. It's almost an island, and that troubles us because you can't get out once it's flooded, but that bit in the middle tends to be protected. And so we want to do some work to make the road out, Tony Lane itself, but going up towards the car park and the main road, a little bit higher and more secure so we can enhance those evacuations. Now, I've seen some people's comments on social media when we grant what are called temporary permissions for people, that we're being prejudiced, we're doing wrong. It's where they want to be, let them. No, never will permission be granted for something permanently in such a high risk level of flooding, because it is a danger to life. And nobody should take those decisions, including ourselves. And simply raising bits of land puts more of it at risk. But the pre-existing Tony Lane sites that have been there for some time, I think we can do some work to make evacuation more possible. And that consequently means that areas that have temporary permissions in areas they shouldn't, in future, those permissions won't be renewed. But I think there's some work that can be done on Tony Lane if landowners will work with us and our liaison officers to rearrange some of the sites and have a bit more provision there as well, working with those families. It's important we do that, and I want to do that, because one risk I'm so alive to is, right, we go and buy this site, we begin operating it with people who know what they're doing, and if our own proper Gypsy Traveller communities don't choose to migrate there in part or in whole, then we've got a big empty site costing money, and somebody may be tempted to permit travellers from other parts of the country to come in and park there. I always have an eye to community cohesion. All of us, but particularly within and between Gypsy and Traveller communities, and that's a risk I'm anxious about. Because similarly, if that happens in another 5 years when we run these numbers, it's not going to be 118, it's going to be even higher. I won't say it'll be exponential, that's probably hyperbole, but it will keep getting higher and higher and higher at a rate that is above probably natural replacement of our own Indigenous communities. And I think there's a risk in there for us financially, but very much on the issue of community cohesion. So hopefully I've talked through where the sites might be. It's not happening overnight, people don't worry too much. Hopefully I've been clear on some of the issues as to why we need to do that, and it's government provision. But let me answer 2 further burning questions. The first is, well, what if you don't do it? Well, here there is a big risk, and it's a little bit technical. But this is part of proving that we plan for all the communities and houses in Newark and Sherwood. It's something called the local plan, the local development framework, huge document that we provide. And that's where a lot of you will know there's allocations for houses, so it could be land south of Newark, there's some parts of Southall, little bits of Loudon. We try and grow sustainable communities. Now, if we can't evidence and show that we are providing for the population growth in the Gypsy Traveller community as well, then planning inspectors and others will say, that plan is not sound. Their words, not mine. That plan is not sound. If it's not sound, it can't therefore be used to judge planning applications either when they're received, but most importantly, when they go to appeal. Their doors will be open. Planning applications can come in for developments almost literally anywhere, and unless they totally breach national policy, we can't say no. We'd lose any appeal. Now that impacts on every community in the district and each and every person, and is a risk we can't do. I would be totally improper, I'd be lying if I said to you that is something we can properly do, and I won't lie to you, which is why I'm being upfront on this. So the next one, how much does it cost? Well, I can't give you exact figures, but we know we need to do some exploratory works, we know we're going to have to purchase the sites, we know we're going to have to kit them out, and we know we need to do that bit of work on Tony Lane. Estimates in the region of probably the minimum of £8.4 million. We don't have £8.4 million specifically for this. The government has just launched a £10 million pot for schemes such as this, with a maximum of £1 million grant per council that applies. 8.4 million, the grant pot's 10 million. I could spend it all in Newark and Sherwood by the sounds of things, and 1 million doesn't dent it sufficiently. So the government are being very constructive, because I have been lobbying hard on this with many colleagues and others. They're being very constructive to talk to us about the methodology and how it might change now and in the future. Hopefully, they're going to work with us more on the different funding packages that might be available. And certainly, going forward, this is something that needs greater consideration and is not focused on so few areas in this country. I'm doing that work. Long video, I'm so sorry, but there is the need to explain the facts, the process, the costs, the locations, and what is coming hereafter. And I hope I've done that. I hope I demonstrate I will always be honest. This is something we simply have to do due to national policy and national requirement. I'm not just sloping the shoulders and putting the blame. That is statement of fact. I hope I've conveyed why it is imperative that we do these things to ensure our planning is sound, that we can do things that our community requires, but we've got to do it. I will find a way of doing this as best as possible to ensure that community cohesion and that it doesn't cost the residents of Newark and Sherwood and nobody else in this county or country to deliver this. But let me say again, please, a lot of this, so much of this, and why I wanted to do this video, is the imperative of sustaining community cohesion. Our resident Gypsy Traveller families have been here for many generations, and you will know as many of them as I do. They're good eggs. I do not want people being tarnished. Those that aren't exist in all communities. You might not like this. It's quite apparent. I don't like all of this. And indeed, I know through our regular liaison that some of our Gypsy Traveller communities are really quite anxious about this and wondering if it's the right thing to do. So we'll all pull together and do the best we can to demonstrate that to government and others that are listening, that we'll try our very, very best for Newark and Sherwood. That is my commitment to you. So again, my apology, it's a long video, but there's a lot to explain there, as I'm sure you'll realise. I've tried not to use national policy speak all the time and to convey it, and you'll clearly understand that if this was a press release, I'd be on page 7 by now already. I know this will excite opinion. I know it will invite criticism. The best I can do, as I always seek to do on behalf of the council, is to be honest, forthright, and give you the facts. And I hope in this video I've done so. Thank you so much for your time.